Hello. There are 3 readings from the New Testament that I could have chosen from today. The trouble is, they all contain hard things. And I know I did say in a previous reflection that John and I were trying to choose from the readings that the lectionary provides for each day as a discipline for ourselves. But as I was thinking through that this morning, I thought, hang on, these little offerings of ours are meant to be comforting rather than challenging. Maybe I need to think less about the discipline and more about you, my dear YouTubers of St. Mark's. So does that mean that I'm ignoring today's set passages? Well, no, but I'm going to stretch the one I've chosen rather a long way. As on Friday, I've chosen Luke's Gospel again, part of his account of Jesus' Sermon on the Plain. You may recall that it parallels the Sermon on the Mount that we find in Matthew's Gospel. Is it the same event, set in a slightly different location, or did Jesus give the same teaching more than once? Well, both are possible, and I don't think it matters much. I will read the whole passage as set, but I want to use the second section as a jumping off point for my reflection this morning. So here it is. It's Luke chapter 6, verses 39 to the end. Jesus told them a parable. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? A disciple is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully qualified will be like the teacher. Why do you see the speck in your neighbour's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbour, "Friend, let me take out the speck in your eye," when you yourself do not see the log in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbour's eye. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit, for each tree is known by its own fruit. Figs are not gathered from thorns, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of the heart produces good, and the evil person out of evil treasure produces evil. For it is out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? I will show you what someone is like who comes to me, hears my words, and acts on them. That one is like a man building a house, who dug deeply and laid the foundation on rock. When a flood arose, the river burst against that house, but could not shake it, because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not act is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. When the river burst against it, immediately it fell, and great was the ruin of that house. Well, I imagine we all know these 3 pieces of teaching pretty well. You might remember the older words used in the first one, mote instead of speck and plank instead of log. The word hypocrite has survived, though. It's tough stuff, not an easy listen. The 2 men who build houses, one without foundation or with a foundation on sand, and the other who wisely dug down to rock and built his foundations on it, are the stuff of a children's chorus I remember from years ago. The children loved the bit where the foolish man's house came tumbling down in a storm. Aren't children lovely? But it's the tree and its fruit that set me thinking. Thank goodness something has. I don't want to talk about the teaching in that bit. Instead, I want to use the idea of good trees and harvesting fruit. John was talking a few days ago about using the enforced restrictions which keep us at home to do new things, or perhaps to do other things better or for longer. He talked about rediscovering poetry. I've had to discover a number of allied skills in order to get John's and my readings and reflections to you 4 days a week. I've had to master a new video recording program, which I have to say did not work well tonight, which took quite a bit of trial and error, as you might imagine. And I've had to work out with John how to get his recordings to me so that I can post them on YouTube. The recordings are too large to send by ordinary email. And I've also had to start my own YouTube channel. Not something you expect to be doing at 72. I've also been learning Welsh. You may think that's an odd thing to do, but being a linguist by profession and having lived in both Wales and Brittany, whose languages are related, I've always wanted to do it, and now I am. Will I ever be let out again to speak to a Welshman? Not guaranteed. And of course, I, like you, have been trying to do whatever I can to keep our church family in touch with one another and to keep our communal worship alive despite our physical separation. So, odd as it may seem, the bit about good and bad trees made me think of gardening. And that's another thing Deirdre and I, rather neglectful gardeners, have been doing since March, digging up part of our lawn to plant potatoes and salad crops, just in case. Deirdre is out there preparing more ground as I'm writing this. And it made me think of nurturing plants, making them grow, looking after their needs with water and food, weeding around them so that they can grow strong and unencumbered by unwelcome invaders. We know all about those, don't we? If it doesn't seem too far-fetched, I had this thought today, that we are all a bit like plants in a garden, but we are tending one another, nurturing one another, trying to keep one another strong and growing despite what we're living through. And I think it's working. I feel that most of us, most days, are in good heart. Without being smug, I think you, my church family, are without exception good people, and your hearts, your spiritual hearts that is, do produce so much good. I've been so aware of your mutual concern for one another in these last weeks, your thoughtfulness for one another, your generosity towards one another. I feel so blessed to be part of this family of St. Mark's. Don't stop doing all the wonderful things you are doing, phoning one another, emailing one another, praying for one another, sometimes taking or sending little gifts to one another, always keeping that distressing safe distance, of course. This pandemic is really testing us all, isn't it? Some days, if you're like Deirdre and me, you feel rather flat. Not for any particular reason, but simply because of the lack of contact with our natural and our church families, and because our days lack variety at the moment. But it is so good to know that you are all there, still praying, still loving one another, caring for one another, keeping the faith. I really believe that we shall emerge from this testing time better than we were before. We will have been refined in a sense. In Isaiah chapter 48 we find this in verse 10. See, I have refined you, not like silver. I have tested you in the furnace of adversity. Well, we're being tested in the furnace of adversity too, aren't we? Not by God, as Isaiah believed then, but I don't now, but by the need to preserve our lives and that of others, to minimise the burden we place on frontline workers, and to make sacrifices in the national interest. With God's help, we shall pass through this trial, and our love for one another and for our world will be all the greater when we can be together again and fully enjoy our world again. We will care for it and for each other even better because we will appreciate it and them so much more. God give us the strength to endure and to emerge as good people who out of the good treasure of the heart produce good. That is the right way to be refined. Thanks as always for being with me this morning. Tomorrow, Wednesday, at 9:15, live on Zoom, Tricia will lead us in a service of morning prayer, and I do hope that many of you will be able to join us for that. Meanwhile, until Friday when I'm with you again, God bless you and bye-bye.